Hey everybody, hey everybody. Welcome to the Rig on Wheels show featuring MVT, the first ever truck driver recruitment show. I am your host, Kameel Gaines. I am the CEO and founder of Rig on Wheels. And of course, joining me is our favorite VP, Robert Pierson, over there at MVT, Mr. LaValle. And he, of course, is the VP of Recruitment. And we are here for your ultimate destination for transportation and trucking industry news, insights, hot jobs, recruitment tips, driver tips. So let's do it. Let's make history. How you
Let's
doing,
roll.
Pierson?
I am doing well in very cold Chicago, Illinois at this moment, but I'll get warmed up with this show.
Yeah, it's cold in Chicago. I mean, I'm from there, and I have a lot of friends, and they keep telling me how cold it is, and I'm like, God, no. I moved from there for a reason, even though it's been cold in Houston, so which is inhumane.
But oh, it definitely has been. I wasn't on with you last week because the runways were frozen out there at IAH, and that does not happen very often in Houston.
Yes, everything, it just feels like everything is just terrible. But you know what? Nemmer did such a great job, even though she had a panic attack. She thought she was just literally going to die on camera, but she did well. Everything was great. So she did us proud. Let's jump into the news. We don't have a whole lot going on in our industry, but we got some good news. When it comes to diesel, it is down. So this time I'll have Pierson talk about the other part, but I really like to talk about how compared to this time last year, it's 76.6 cents less than this time last year. So that's crazy. But I feel like now we're complaining more about it, or at least I am, or paying more attention to it.
It's a nice relief. It's so expensive running a trucking company now for most carriers. If you look in the last 12 months, most carriers have seen their liability insurance go up about 10%. Trucks are now going up dramatically. As we talked about a little bit when Mac was going through their strikes. Trailers are more expensive. The one relief that the industry has at this moment seems to be from a fuel perspective, especially as heavily dependent as a lot of carriers are right now on broker freight. So sitting at 383.8, it's not the cheapest it's ever been by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a happy reprieve from where we were this time last year in terms of price. And so those prices of items are still going to continue to go up, but it gives everybody a reprieve. And it's one of the things that drives up inflation in the country. So if fuel can stay down, it gives us a little relief as we've had horrible inflation here, and we need the Fed to start lowering their interest rate, but that can't happen as long as prices are high. So this could lead to some better things down the road from an economic standpoint if prices can stay suppressed.
Yeah, I think they were saying whoever they are, is kind of probably the news sources that pop up on my phone in the morning. But I think like in June or so, they're thinking that we should see some starting to decline in interest rates and all of that good stuff. I hope everything.
It would help. I know that there's a lot of sectors of this industry. It's one of the things, if you look at the spot market currently, flatbed seems to be taking the greatest hit at this moment. And as you and I have talked, January, February is not the hottest time for freight for most niches of the industry, with a few exceptions. Part of what's hurting flatbed right now is, quite frankly, the high interest rates are driving down the need for housing. And housing definitely relies on the flatbed world to get those supplies from point A to point B. So if interest rates go down, there's a lot of drivers that would reap the benefit of that in the long run. One of the places, generally speaking, and we've talked on here, between setting your Google to news alerts to get anything trucking is always a good idea as a driver, just to be savvy on what's going on there. And then if you want to get a good perspective on what's going on from a freight volume standpoint, I'd always suggest on Instagram, beyond just following Rig on Wheels, which you should definitely be doing if you're not already doing that. There's a source called Transportation Trendsetter on Instagram that does a really deep dive on a weekly basis. I know you follow it, Kameel, they do a pretty good job as far as following what the trends are within the industry. And so I'd recommend that because they will point out the fact that flatbed's being decimated at this moment.
Yeah, following trends is very important because in any business, it's business is volatile. We know that, but it's also variable. But we have to still control it. And in business, you can still control your variables to where it feels like fixed price, especially when you know your seasons. So just like you were saying, Pierson, as far as with the flatbed, if because things like this has happened before, it's happened before. So we know that the housing market is getting hit. That means lumber isn't moving, the interest rates are high in the heavens right now. So flatbed is getting hit. So that means that the flatbed folk carriers have to do some adjusting. And even though one would say that that's variable, it's kind of not variable when you know your market, you know your niche, and you're able to control it. Are you able to speak on that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's one of the things that as a driver, I would absolutely ask your recruiter, A, who are some of your customers? B, what percentage of your freight is customer based versus broker freight? And there's a bit of a trade off in those two worlds. If you're mainly a customer based trucking company, when you hit the peaks, it's not necessarily as high. Broker rates sometimes will pay much more during those peak times. The problem with broker, if you're relying too heavily on broker, is those valleys tend to be very painful as they are right now, and they have been painful for about 9 to 12 months at this point for a lot of companies. It's why I'm happy 90+% of the freight that we run is direct customer relationships. Many of these customers, we've had relationships for decades at this point. It's really important because, again, when that freight goes down and those spot markets get suppressed, that customer freight's what keeps you going because the spot market can be very, very ugly depending on supply and demand. And that's where those trends come into play. About 90% of our freight's direct customer freight. Now, brokers can serve a purpose, especially if you're going point A, point B, point C, back to point A, and all of a sudden one of your customers cancels a load and you need to get from point B to C to keep that route going. Absolutely. A broker load can make that happen for you. It's a huge advantage of working with a broker. But when your largest customers are brokers, or the majority of the freight that you do is brokerage right now, you're going to be hurting. And so a lot of companies that got that equilibrium out of whack because they went chasing broker freight when you had spot market rates at $2.50, $3 a mile in the world of dry van, are now going and having a lot of issues. And we still get 5 to 10 drivers a week that call us up going, I was making 75 cents a mile on no-touch dry van freight. And they were. And they can't figure out a lot of times, why am I not getting paid that? I just got laid off, or my company doesn't need me anymore. Because they were chasing spot market freight. Spot market freight, if you're pulling something at $1.50 a mile, you cannot give half of that to the driver because you still have to pay for the truck and the fuel and the equipment. And try to stay in business and keep a dispatcher employed or a receptionist or financial people employed. And so that's the thing is I would follow those trends. And as a driver, we have been fortunate. We've not had to have any conversations about going backwards on pay with our drivers, which has been a blessing. And a lot of that blessings, because 90% of what we do is direct customer freight. It doesn't mean that we've had customers not want to have conversations about the rates that they're paying, but it's a whole lot better than being experts at broker freight and living off of that during the good times and paying the consequences come the bad times.
And the bad times do come knocking. In our industry, when they come knocking hard. When we're here to eat, or that's what we call it in third party, but or just basically when life is good and everything is hunky-dory, that's fine. You can do more on the spot market. I still think direct freight is better, dedicated customers, all of that, whatever it is, your terminology as a carrier that you use. But when bad hits and we must build for bad, you can't build thinking everything is always going to be good. That's not even possible. And it's about keeping your pipeline, or whatever you want to call it, depending on what department you are within logistics. You have to keep it full and flowing, and that doesn't work off the stock market. It never did, it never will, and it's not even common sense. And it hurts
Yep.
the driver. It hurts the driver big time. It just does.
Yeah, there's an ebb and a flow to all this, and it gets into the value of customer service right now. I can tell you that the shippers have the upper hand. They expect their freight to be there on time. If it's not going to be on time, they expect communication. Obviously, with the weather disruptions we've had over the past week and a half, there were going to be late loads just because you have to operate safely.
Right.
But customer service right now is a really, really big deal. And so if you're a driver, this is essentially where you become an asset to a carrier. Your ability to offer that customer service to the customer, be reliable, meet your expectations, show up when you say you're going to. If life happens, be open and have an open dialogue with your fleet manager. This is really where you make your money. It may not show up right now because of the current freight environment, but the raises that come 2-3 years down the road come from the work that takes place today. And so, yeah, you do not want to be chasing broker freight. Like I said, they're necessary. Brokers can be a major asset to you in one-off situations. But if you're at a company right now that seems to be pulling mainly broker freight, when you go in and the security guard's never seen your company go into their yard before, that should be a concern. That is a major concern right now. Because look, I'm not saying that the company should get fat off the hog, but you want to work for a company that's profitable. Because if that company's not profitable, it's a ticking time clock when things come to an end. And they either get sold or they unfortunately go out of business. And you much rather dictate when you leave an employer, not the other way around.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I want to do is go to commercial, whichever commercial of Kayla's choosing, and I wrote down a few things because I want to come back to it. You were talking about relationships and relationship building and everything, and that goes for the driver, the recruiter, the dispatcher, the C-levels, the VPs. That goes for everybody within trucking, logistics, and everything. But to be honest, our concern is trucking. And so I do want to have that conversation. And I know it feels like we keep just beating it over and over, but it's the most important. It's important when life is wonderful and gravy for a lot of reasons. But it really is where we need everybody to understand it right now. And it keeps our senses, and we don't go crazy as well. So, Kayla, if you could take us to whatever commercial that you choose, and then when we come back, we'll talk about relationship building.
My name is Stacy Morton, and my position is OTR driver, and I've been with the company for 8 months. I enjoy being with part of the family because good miles, nice people. They listen to the drivers. The pay is excellent here at MVT. The home time is very good. You get to go home anytime you want. The dispatchers are really nice. They listen to the drivers, whatever you want. They will do their best to give you what you need. And the equipment is good, and safety is excellent. Yeah, they're fast, and the roadside is good. They listen to you, and they get the job fixed in a timely manner. Yeah, I would recommend other drivers to come to MVT because this is a good place to work, and you get excellent home time and everything that you need here.
Kayla did really good with that commercial because I told her like this segment was about relationship building. You would have thought I planned that commercial, but she picked out that commercial, and what that lovely lady talking about was the relationship that MVT built with her. So that piggybacks on what we are talking about. So I know that you keep preaching about, and we talk about this a lot in our sales meetings every day, and your name comes up a lot. you and Grant Cardone. So that's a good thing because I just love him. So let's talk about it, like relationship building.
Yep.
What do you feel about that when it comes to the driver?
This industry is a relationship industry. Like it's just, there's no getting around it. It's not about the trucks. It's not about freight. Literally everything takes place around a relationship. From the customer having a direct relationship with the carrier having a direct relationship with their personnel. And then if you peel another layer back of the onion, it can be micromanaged down to the point of that fleet manager, that load planner, and that driver. That symbiotic relationship between those three individuals, making sure that everything operates effectively. Trucking is 1,000 minute little details that when it all adds up together, it can look really good or it can look really bad. If those three parties between the load planner, the fleet manager, and the driver, sometimes there's different verbiage used to describe those three individuals, but that relationship between those three people becomes very important because if anything breaks down in the communication process, there's 1,000 little spots where something can go wrong and ultimately it fails miserably in the long run. And so it's where we're really fortunate. Royal Jones, founder of the company, former driver, has physically done the job, loves our driver appreciation because he gets a chance to physically sit down and talk with drivers, which he is one. So he understands their language. And quite frankly, that probably if he had his way, who he'd only hang out with. It's understanding and having people with industry knowledge, and more importantly, having empathy, having people talk to each other and share ideas and notes. If those things take place, this can be kind of a fun job and a meaningful job. If any of that from point A to point B breaks down, this turns into a cluster really quick.
Yeah, it's an assembly line. And then we were taught that like that whole assembly line thing in grammar school, right? They call it something else now. But it's the assembly line and it's all about team. So or relay or and I know like you were saying, they might call those three people or persons different things and at different carriers. Some might call it shuttle drivers, relay drivers, but basically, if you think about the Olympics or what have you, and you have somebody passing the baton, that's why it's very important to make sure that your dispatcher is professional and treats the driver with respect because he or she deserves it. Okay, they're literally bringing almond milk to my youngest son almost every other day because he is a human garbage disposal. And then the driver has to be a professional driver, not just a driver. Nobody wants just a driver that's somebody that literally just holds a steering wheel, but an actual professional driver, because the professional driver is the one that's going to do right by the shipper, going to have great customer service. All of those things matter. Treating someone like the golden rule, right? So all of those things matter. So it's about the team. Would you say the team? Okay.
It literally, it has to be. Even if you are a one-person operation running a truck, normally a lot of those people have a support team with them. It may be a spouse. It may be that I own a truck and it's just me driving and I use ATVS that does my finances out of Denver. It may be, generally speaking, this industry, because of all the various elements in it, you have to have somebody else helping you.
Yeah, I was just about to say that there is no one woman show or man. We're not leaving you all out, Pierson, okay? But there is no one person show anymore. There can't be because it's too many nuances with everything. So there is a team now, depending on how efficient your team is, whether or not the department runs well. That's one thing or another, but it has to be a team. So if your driver is not a professional driver, it messes up the entire ecosystem. If your recruiter isn't what his sheet's supposed to be, it messes up everything. If the communication doesn't do well, right? And I explained last week, communication means we need to know whether somebody is lying and whether somebody is telling the truth. And those are two different meanings, not the same. So it's important that we know all of that And then also, like I said about the dispatcher. Now you was talking about the fleet manager. Were you about to say
Yeah,
something else?
I would also say that one of the things I try to tell and bestow knowledge on anybody is how do you get people to do something for you that don't owe you anything? And how do they get them to come back and help you again? Because we're going to need to help each other again. I naturally, if you look, we take a personality test over here, and I can be, if I'm not in check, I can be domineering, authoritative, and that's cool and all. It gets me instant gratification, but I have to keep working with people and have them enjoying working with me.
Right.
And so, look, if I was to go to Burger King every single day for lunch and I'm a jerk, eventually someone's going to spit in my food. I hope not.
Exactly.
Nothing against Burger King. But if I go in there and I'm friendly and I'm personable and I talk and I do a little chit chat with them, eventually we build a rapport. And now we start knowing each other on a first name basis. Now I come to the drive through window and they go, the usual today? Because I've built up that rapport. It's the same thing at work. It's the same thing no matter what profession you do, but in particular in trucking, where that driver and that fleet manager may not be within 2,000 miles of each other. But if they build that rapport of how do I get somebody to help me accomplish the same goal when they don't really need to, but I want them to, and I want to work together. So if the fleet manager and the driver are taking that approach to it, it's where, hey, something hasn't gone right. Maybe I'm going to come into this and instead of being defensive, I'm going to go, I may be wrong, but I have this problem. Can you help me with it? It's starting
Yeah.
that conversation where you're not necessarily on the attack, and in particular over a telephone call where things can be misinterpreted. We've all seen an email where somebody has typed everything in all caps, and you're sitting there going, why is this person mad? In actuality, they have the caps locks on. They're not mad, but that's how you take it. It's the same thing can happen over the phone. If you have, how do I have this person want to work with me next week and the week after? It makes a world of difference when things are not going to go right. This is trucking. Something's going to go wrong at least once a week. How you overcome it
Or
makes that relationship successful.
look, or daily, we're trucking,
Or daily.
or daily.
I'm trying to
But
be positive,
also,
though.
but also something else is everybody within trucking has a high stressful job. So if you go in with that knowledge of knowing that me as a professional driver, knowing that my fleet manager really has a stressful job because his boss is on him, his boss's boss is on her, so when you think about that, it should take you have a step back. If everybody will give each other grace, then move forward. I think that's a better way to build relationships is just give each other grace because we are in the people business and your attitude makes a huge difference. And like you said, what we're doing now is going to determine the relationships, whether we stand in business and everything within the next few years. Because
Yep.
some people sell their business in order to move on or do higher things, a lot of stuff. But then you have some that are selling for obvious reasons, the reasons why everybody thinks the first minute somebody thinks of, selling a business. But it's really about the relationships. It's gravely about that. How do we service the end person? And it depends on where you are, who the end person is. For us, it's the driver, but it just kind of depends on, who you are. If you're in retail, It's going to be the customer. It just kind of depends. For you, it's the driver, but it also is the shipper.
Absolutely.
So, so that's great. What are some of the things that you can think of that Bobby, your driver at MVT, he is having a terrible day? Him and his wife, I'm doing a scenario. Him and his wife not doing well. He just got off the telephone with her. Now he's dealing with his dispatcher. His dispatcher just got off the phone with her husband. They're not doing well. How would they handle that? These are real life situations. So we can literally sit here and say, Kameel, me, because I know me, right? I'm not going to say you. You probably are pleasant all the time. But me, I have to take a step back 5, 6, 7 times a day and say, okay, Kameel, it's probably me, it's not him. So how would you say that they can rectify that? Because dispatchers and drivers are the ones that make and break situations. And as a third party recruiter, when we hear negative things about a company, it's not typically about the fleet manager. It's about the dispatcher, right? So how can we mend that with those two situations? Both of them are having issues at home. One goes home every day because they're a dispatcher. This one doesn't get home for 5 to 7 days because he's on Division 329, right? So how would they mend that?
Not to oversimplify it, but at the end of the day, you have to have empathy. Putting yourself in the perspective of somebody else is important. And sometimes it's not sympathy, but it's empathy. And the empathy is the important part. Everybody's life is going to have challenges. Sometimes you can relate to those challenges. Other times you can't because you've just not been through it. But legitimately, if you're a good person and you want the person that you work with to be successful, that empathy is really important. It's hard for a fleet manager or dispatcher to be successful if they're a sociopath. But on the flip side of it, if they're empathetic and they legitimately want what's best for the driver or their coworker, more importantly, that empathy cannot be overstated. There's going to be a bunch of one-off situations, health issues, needing to get home because a house fire, a car accident, kids' graduation, and about 100 other reasons. If I have that empathy, though, I can have an honest discussion with it, even when my life's going bad. And I might not be in the best mood. I started the day off bad. My wife got on to me because I probably did something stupid the night before. But if I get on the phone, that person should not necessarily know that because, again, I'm trying to be servant to them. I'm trying to help them, assist them. That empathy becomes really important. You cannot be a successful fleet manager / dispatcher if you don't care about the person on the other end of the line. If you treat a driver as a resource, as a tool or a piece of equipment, the same as you would a truck, your turnover, not the company's, but that specific fleet manager's turnover will generally be considerably higher because there's normally a large enough sample size that over time you're able to go, what's wrong with this one? Why is this thing not like the others? Generally speaking, empathy is the number one thing. You can't train somebody on it. They either have it or they don't. And the moment they don't have it, you have a fleet manager you need to cut out like a cancer in the locker room.
Yeah. And I think some of it is like the life coaching thing because, yeah, you either have it or don't have it, but it's like any muscle, like we was talking about, you go exercise, I open up the refrigerator, like you either have it or don't have it. Yes, that is true. But you also need to exercise it. So what I think, and when I was an employee at different corporations, large corporations, right, such as an MVT, I didn't work for MVT, but such as an MVT, large corporations, what I think that would have been good, and it doesn't matter if it's a trucking company, an advertising company, it doesn't matter. Retention is retention. I think some type of wellness life coach or some type of skills so people would know how to deal with certain situations because that's real life. And life happens. And when you have people that are having issues at home, it's very easy for us to say, check them at the door. But if you are a very emotional or compassionate person, it's harder to do that.
I think it's also important not to become cynical. Things are going to happen. Your last employer may have had a dispatcher you didn't like. Or if you're a fleet manager, you may have had 2 drivers that did something and abandoned a truck someplace. Those 2 drivers don't represent the other 40 or 50 drivers that you work with. If you're the driver, that previous fleet manager that maybe didn't listen to you and give you their time of day is not representative of your next dispatcher. The important thing, and this probably goes beyond just work, but if you can avoid cynicism, That will save you a world of hurt. Because again, coming into that conversation where you're not setting somebody up to get defensive becomes really important. So, if I have a driver as an example today that showed up to orientation and didn't bring a CDL with him, which is weird because you can't legally drive a truck without having your CDL on you. And I'm not quite sure how he got on the plane without ID, but we'll get into that conversation later. But I have to be careful on my end. I can't paint that picture on everybody else who's in orientation this week. They showed up with their CDL. It becomes very important is to not let these one-off situations jade your judgment and how you view other people. Because if you do that, you're going to be difficult to work with, and you're going to be mentally in a real bad spot. Keeping yourself balanced and going, this one experience is not representative of these other experiences becomes really important.
I like that. And as time goes on, I want us to talk about this more on different shows because Nimmer did say that when we got off the show, like drivers, and it's not just about dispatches because I love dispatches, but it's hard for people to understand each other and each other's role. It's almost like because one person hadn't ever done the other person's role before. So it's kind of hard, and the empathy part, they don't have it. So
yeah, it can become very problematic and will turn yourself to where you really lose out on opportunities. Anytime I've ever heard anybody in my career say, drivers always do blank, or fleet managers are always this way, you're coming into a relationship and it's going to fail miserably, and you're probably going to be to blame.
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely need to just always be mindful, but also be able to talk about this more, because during times like this, when things are more difficult or whatever, that's when these conversations are needed, because when everything is gravy, everybody can be happy. But during more sensitive times, everything is, all over the place, and we definitely need to be conscious of that. So I want to go to commercial and then come back and definitely talk about hot jobs. And before we get into the hot jobs, I actually got an email from a driver, so I can go ahead and ask that question first and go from there. It's about a hot job, or an area. So we'll go to commercial.
Hello, everybody. I'm DeAnthony Davis. I'm a truck driver from Cleveland, Texas. I've been driving for 3.5 years now. I recently saw a podcast with Rig on Wheels on YouTube. I gave them a call. They was fast. They was efficient. They helped me out. I didn't really want to be over the road, so they got me a good regional job. And hey, you should give them a call.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back. Okay, so Pierson. So I got to drive in because they specifically said MVT. I was like, let me ask this question to MVT. They weren't just saying, do you have? So is there going to be any grave opportunity? Grave is their word, not mine. Okay, so I'm not being a grave digger, even though in the Monster Truck Jam, that is my favorite. Anyway, that's fine. So any opportunity out of Portland, Oregon is where they are. They want to know if MVT has it.
Not at present, but there may be some things coming down the road at this moment. Again, we deal with direct customers, so we're interacting with a present customer that's looking at expanding some stuff out. So at this moment, no, but stay tuned over the next couple of weeks. That may be changing here. So I will keep you abreast on that. We won't forget about that. And within a couple of weeks, no matter what the result is here, we'll bring this up again on the show. And so in 2 weeks, when we meet here, I'll bring up most likely what we're doing on Division 220. But right now we're going to hold tight. So there's nothing in Portland currently, but stay tuned.
But that. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's talk about hot jobs, whether it's a division or area. Which one?
Yeah, let's talk teams and let's talk solo. We have a couple opportunities for teams. We have a Division 110 and we have a Division 329. On the 110 side, it does a lot of southern coast to coast. So you're going to see a lot of Southern California, Albuquerque, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, all the way to the southeast and coming back again, occasionally going up to Denver. So a lot of nice length of haul. So you're going to get plenty of miles in on that end. Have openings on that for out of DFW, Albuquerque, New Mexico, as well as El Paso, Texas. So 110 continues to be a popular destination for a lot of those teams. Those teams are generally going to see freight and opportunities where an individual driver is going to make anywhere between $1,600 to $1,800 a week. Occasionally, they may go up to Portland, which we'll see if that business expands like we talked about earlier. So, again, if you're a team looking at Division 110, $1,600 to $1,800 a week, really good opportunity there. Plenty of miles, good length of haul, and generally out 6 to 7 days, home 34 hours to 48 hours on that opportunity. If you're based in Texas, though, and you really want to stay closer to home, at about $1,600 a week, we have Division 329, which is our Texas Regional and Southern Oklahoma, which for teams is a really good opportunity. And if I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my screen at this moment, by the way. With that said, we're looking for teams that live out of the San Antonio market, DFW, Houston, Texas, Laredo, Texas, or Mount Vernon, Texas. So we can definitely take teams that can do that out of those three markets, some opportunity there. So keep an eye on that. For solo drivers right now, I will say Division 440. So if you live out of Houston or you live out of Memphis, have a nice opportunity. Basically, you're running up to the Tennessee area, over to the Carolinas, and then back down into Texas and Dallas, Fort Worth, in the Houston area. So again, Houston or Memphis, that opportunity there, you're generally going to be out 5 to 7 days. It's all no-touch freight, no endorsements needed. Anywhere between $1,100 to $1,300 a week on that end. It's a solo opportunity, but it's some of the most attractive running lanes in the country. You'll see a lot of opportunities with some direct customer freight. Additionally, out of the Houston area, I'll bring up, we have a number of potential customers coming on board down the road. So the people that we hire now for that division or others based in Houston, before we open opportunities to new drivers, we give it to our drivers internally so they can be promoted in to dedicated or more attractive opportunities. So keep that in mind. The folks that act today out of Houston in particular that get hired on, when those new opportunities come up for, departure, you'll be the first people that we call before we ever give it to a new driver. So keep that in mind, especially in Houston. That's going to become very pivotal, and Dallas Fort Worth over the next, say, 2 to 4 weeks. So now's the time to act on that.
Love it. Also, they had another question, and I think I know this answer, but they did have another question. Brownsville, and I know that's right at the border.
Yeah, we do about 450 cross-border moves a day, but we primarily focus on El Paso and Laredo. So you don't see a lot of MVT trucks in the Brownsville, Reynoso border crossing down there. Theoretically, you could see us occasionally, but don't let that fool you. We're most likely doing a one-off move. We very rarely go down that far south. You never say never in this industry. Something could happen that a year from now we're operating in that area. But right now, most of our cross-border moves take place out of Laredo and El Paso, Texas at this time.
Okay, makes sense. I just wanted to get that out there. So we are definitely heavy in recruiting for teams. My favorite question that we seem to get quite often, and we actually get this a lot, and it's just so funny. When I first started, I always shied away from recruiting teams, and then now it just seems like everybody wants to do teams. So that's a good thing. But this is great about if somebody does not have 6 months experience. You know the question. They don't have 6 months experience, but they want a team with their mom or whomever that does have X amount of experience. So
yep. We have one-time trainer programs. And so as an example, if you live out of any of the markets that we operate out of, and we're actively hiring. So it could be Albuquerque, it could be El Paso, Salt Lake City, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Laredo, Houston, Memphis, Nashville, as an example, St. Louis. And you know somebody that is an experienced, safe, stable driver, meaning they don't have a lot of tickets, accidents, they have a clean record. They can act as a one-time trainer for you so that you can get to that 6-month experience level and you operate as a team. It also tends to be very attractive because a lot of companies, when you come out of school, a lot of companies are only paying students about $500-600 a week, and they got to pay their dues. And I understand that students can be a very expensive proposition for a company from an insurance cost standpoint, wear and tear on the truck. Most of our students, once they get out of their first couple of weeks and they start doing more of the driving than that other person, most of our students are going to be anywhere between $800 to $1,000 a week. And then by the time they get to 6 months, they're fully operating like one of our experienced drivers.
Okay. I have another question. Raven said somebody asked, how many pets?
Yeah. There's always exceptions to it. But right now I can tell you that it's one pet. Don't have many limitations on that end. There is a deposit that's used because we want to make sure that the truck's detailed after anybody gets out. Just like when you get into a new truck, you should not be able to know if the person before you had a pet or if they were a smoker, because if you're getting into that truck, that matters if you don't have a pet and you don't have a smoke or aren't a smoker. With that said, once the deposit's cleared on that, generally it's one pet. There are definitely, we make exceptions for service animals. And so anybody that has the right paperwork on a service animal can get their animal in there within reason. I've not seen somebody with a service boa constrictor, but I'm sure there's somebody out there like that.
Yes. I remember on an airline, probably your favorite airline, but somebody wanted to come on there with an alligator or something like that. Yeah, that was funny.
An emotional support alligator.
Yes, emotional support alligator. I was like, oh, that's cute. But Kayla said there were some questions on the stream. Absolutely. So you want to go for it, Kayla?
Yes. Hello. For the 329 job that pays $1,500 to $1,600, is that for teams only?
We will take solo drivers on that as well. Those teams, though, tend to be very busy with drop and hook, a lot of drop and hook. And so that's where we get into that price range. We will still take drivers for 329. With that said, on 329, I will say this too, we generally could line up in a weekly basis about 20 drivers for 329. I cannot take 20 drivers. So I'm very honest with somebody. We're going to take the 5 to 6 best drivers out of those 20 that meet our minimum criteria. So as an example, it doesn't mean I can't work with you, but we're very careful to make sure our freight levels line up with the number of drivers that we have. And that becomes really important. I want my drivers that I hired to be successful. 6 months from now, if you're not still with us, I've not done my job in recruiting. It's hiring the right driver in the right location for the right job that ultimately judges my success or not. So as an example, if you have multiple jobs, if you've been terminated for late deliveries, I can't afford to bring you on. I want to, and I want you to be successful. I don't wish ill will on anybody, but I'm not going to be able to bring you on board. And so the caveat to that is when you talk to Rig on Wheels, talk to them about more than just one option. So as an example, you may want 329, but let's say you've had 4 or 5 jobs in the last 3 years. We've identified, hey, you're not a bad driver. You've had a couple issues over the last couple of years. I might not be able to bring you onto 329, but as you're talking to the folks at Rig on Wheels and about what your needs are and about what your wants are, if they can sell you on 2 or 3 different divisions that we have, it gives you some versatility. So I may not this week be able to take you on to 329. It doesn't mean you're banned forever. By all means, we believe in career development and career pathways. And your ultimate goal may be 329 because it's more attractive to you. But Kameel's team may look at it and go, hey, I don't think they're going to be able to take you. If there's 20 candidates, they're probably going to have 5 that are going to be ahead of you in this line. But you might want to look at Division 230 as an example. That would have you go Southern California, El Paso, San Antonio, and keep going back and forth along that line as your introductory to MVT. Yeah, 440 as an example, or 330. And so that we can get you hired on, and then 90 days in, we can have that evaluation with you and go, you know what, you've been late, you've been on time on all your loads, you've had no issues whatsoever. We have an opening in 329. Would you like that opening? So that what you do today does not have to be what you do tomorrow. So keep that in mind as you talk to the folks on Rig on Wheels. They may ask some questions about your employment history because they want to set you up for success. And they don't want you to get an application filled out for no reason. It's, you don't care about the labor, you care about the delivery here. We want to make sure that you're successful in the long run there. So keep that in mind. You may have 1 or 2 things that you want to do, but if you're open-minded and you share a lot of information with the team over there, I might not start you on 329, but I probably could start you someplace else.
Yeah, so what we talk about is your A, B, and C. So if you know that MVT is where you want to go, right? So you know MVT is your next home. We got that covered. That's good. So we got that checked off. That's how we would think this is, because we want to set up a game plan for you between us as your third-party recruiter and you being Bobby, right? Now we know that 329 is what you want and works great for you. However, you have 4 jobs right here. Everything else is fine. You're a great driver. It's not that you're not great. So we'll let you know you're great. However, Pierson is going to have 20 drivers on there because 329, everybody recruits for, like every third party recruits for 329. True story. This is literally what we say to the driver. So let's try to look at these other divisions. Let's talk about them. Do any of these fit your fancy? Oh yeah, I like this, I like that. Then we put them in the order that you might like them in. We notate that down in our 10th Street notes, because that's what we use. And then also we say this and communicate, because communication is very important. So we have a strong communication with MVT. So we communicate your A, B, and C to Josue so he knows and he's able to do things. So if for some reason nobody is on 329, yes, we can see if you can get on 329. But if for some reason no, then we'll go to your next one. And if that's something you really want, let's get you going. And then once your 90 days or so is up, everything looking good, you're still the same great driver that you have been all of these years. They don't have any problem putting you where you need to go. That only makes sense. So that's literally how we will communicate with the driver, because it's about, let's literally partner up. Let's see a game plan. Just like when you start at MVT, you have your driver services that want to do a career path. We want to partner up with you because we want to do a plan with you, a plan of action, literally. We want to roll up our sleeves. What's the plan of action? We know MVT is where you want to go. Check. We got that. Now let's talk about your A, B, and C, and let's talk about why A, B, and C. That way, when Josue comes back saying this division is closed, this division just took its last driver, can we do this division? You won't have any problem, and you hopping on it. It's not an issue.
The other thing I'd keep in mind too is it's not just divisional. It may be that you really want a local job, but one's not available at this moment, or one that you would want to have. In a number of the markets, because of the engineered lanes that we do from point A, point B, point C, we have a lot of local drivers do these last mile deliveries. So I may not have a local opening now, but if you come on board, before I give that to a new driver, I go to my current fleet. Would you like this opportunity? I give that first refusal to the current driver base. So as an example, what you're doing today might not be what you're doing tomorrow. So you may be talking to Kameel's team there and, hey, I really want local. Well, why do you want local? We need to understand that. It may be that there's a medical emergency at home and you just have to be home. It may be more of a preference that ultimately you want to get home every day. And so, okay, your pathway's here. We'll get you on this division for MVT. And when they have a local opening, you can grab it. And we have generally, if we don't have current local openings, though, you'll be the first to know about it. It's openly communicated with our active driver base. And we tend to have local positions available out of markets like Albuquerque, out of Dallas-Fort Worth, out of El Paso, Las Cruces, Santa Teresa, Laredo, San Antonio, Houston, Memphis, Nashville, even a couple local drivers that do a really good job for us out of Chicago. We have those local openings, you'll know about it. So if you don't have that opportunity presented to you, just know if you can get on the fleet, we go to the fleet first for that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So if any of this, any of the jobs interest you with MVT or any other company, MVT's experience starts at 6 months, but let's say you're shy of that and you have 3 months, we definitely have other companies. Give us a call at 281-968-3100, 281-968-3100, or go right to our website at rigonwheels.com and fill out the Intella app completely, please. And one of the recruiters will definitely give you a call back as soon as possible within the same day. But let's say it's overnight, then it'll be the next day, obviously. And we do work 7 days a week. So typically on Sunday, it'll be at least one recruiter will work or rotate on a Sunday. So don't be surprised if you put your app in on Saturday and Nimmer or Deborah or Rachel or even Raven will give you a call on a Sunday. So did you have another question, Kayla?
I do have one last question. How many jobs in the last 3 years is MVT looking for?
Generally, our limit's going to be 6. With that said, most of what we see that's able to be hired on, because again, we have a set number of trucks versus number of people applying. Pretty much going to be 4 and no more than 2 in the last year. We're always willing to look on a case-by-case basis. It is not a hard black and white type thing, right, wrong, left, right. We always look at an application on a case-by-case basis. But with that said, if I have 90 applicants lined up wanting to come into orientation next week and I have 20 trucks, I have to be able to separate and go, who are the 20 that we're going to take on that end? And so employment history definitely plays a role in that. Safety record plays a role in that. And you know, quite frankly, if you have terminations for late deliveries, if you've abandoned equipment, there's things that I have to look on that in order to make an informed decision of what candidates we want to pursue. So generally speaking, again, it's a case-by-case basis, and that's the thing to keep in mind on that, is 4 jobs in 3 years. What I will tell anybody, it has to be case-by-case basis, though. So let's say that I have a driver, and let's go to the extreme, that had an assault 30 years ago. It really is a case-by-case basis. You are free to apply. Just because you feel like if you come into it going, I'm not going to get a job here. This is the nice thing on Rig on Wheels and then applying at a company directly, is my qualification standards or my situation with trucks may be different than another company's. So just because MVT may say no based off of geography, history, or anything like that, Kameel's group can look at those other opportunities where I may not have that luxury. You know, if my recruiter has a driver that calls up in Dallas-Fort Worth and they have 5 jobs and we could only take a few other people and they start pitching a job at JB Hunt, I'm probably having a weird conversation with my recruiter. Dude, what are you doing? Where Kameel has that luxury where her team physically works with a number of other clients. And so you may call up the big thing with any of the recruiters at Rig on Wheels, though. be honest. And this is the nice thing about not talking to the company originally, but dealing with a third party like Kameel's group. Just be honest, have an open discussion. This is my experience level. This is the good, this is the bad. Generally speaking, they're not going to be judgmental, and they'll be able to go, well, hey, you don't quite fit here, here, and here, but I do have something here. It may be a company that you've heard of or never heard of, but that's the nice luxury of going through Kameel is I can't do that for you internally, and I shouldn't do that for you internally. I represent Mesilla Valley Transportation, where that's where you need that assistance of, I'm not quite sure if I qualify or not. They will be able, as long as you're transparent with them, they can have that honest discussion. Now, you may not like the answer, but you want an honest discussion quickly. They're a good source for that.
Yeah, thank you about that, Pierson. Yeah, it's a definitely 152%. Just give honest. Nothing you've done is going to shock me now, being in this industry a little over 14 years now. It's at this point, it's just nothing. So just say it so we can literally determine. And then when we talk about requirements and minimum requirements, to even go directly back to Kayla's question, minimum requirements are just that, minimum requirements. It doesn't mean that you don't qualify, but in instances like what's going on in the trucking economy right now, supply and demand, right? So think business wise, everybody is going to want the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And if we talk about it, if it's only 10 trucks and it is 15 people that are more than qualified, you have to start chopping off for some reason. So that's kind of what happens.
I actually have a question that came in too, so I can go ahead and throw a question in there.
Oh, look at that. Look at Pierson with a question.
Yeah, the question that came in is, do I have to haul beer products? So we'll have that discussion. So there's certain products people don't want to haul because of religious reasons, personal reasons, moral reasons. So this is a little bit unique from a standpoint that I'll go ahead and cover this here. We do have some divisions that do have beer accounts, Anheuser-Busch as an example. So if you're pulling out of Houston, traditionally, if you're doing dry van out of Houston, one of the commodities you'll rely heavily on going northbound in particular is going to be beer from an Anheuser-Busch as an example. If you're in Colorado, which is a consumer market, beer is a major staple that comes either out of Coors for some carriers or out of Anheuser-Busch further towards Fort Collins. So yeah, you definitely do. We are honest with you. You cannot go, I'm willing to help you with these customers, but not these customers. Right. Now, we'll be honest with you about the accounts that we have and what products we haul. So as an example, when Rig on Wheels sends us a customer, or not a customer, but really my customer, a driver on the flip side of it, and says, well, hey, I want to know about the accounts that you haul. Do you haul blank? We have no problem getting into that discussion with you. We've had drivers that said, hey, I'm a deacon at a church. I have to be home on Sunday. We can't do that. It's based really on the customer side of it. We can't customize it based off of you. It's more we're coming in here and telling the customer we can service their account. So it's a little bit different. And so keep that in mind in your job search. That's one of those things you're going to want to tell Rig on Wheels. I can only haul these days. I won't haul these customers. Because the frustrating thing for you as the driver, as well as Rig on Wheels, is if you get all the way to orientation and go, wait a minute, I can't do that, or I won't do that. I'm not here to judge, but that's one of those things you want to have that discussion on that very first phone call. Because if you do it when you get to orientation, you've wasted a whole lot of your time. It doesn't mean that the job doesn't exist, but have that dialogue in the beginning. That's one of those first conversation things that you want to bring up on that first call.
And those are typical things that you can't haul alcohol and spirits. You just know that you can't do that. And then also if because you are a deacon or a pastor or somebody else on the cloth, you have to be at church on Sunday at a particular time. That's not something that just happened when you showed up to orientation. So these are conversations that need to happen right away because it's not going to change. It's trucking. It's what it is.
This is a 365, 24/7 business. It doesn't mean that there's not jobs out there that fit your exact need.
Mhm.
But on those, this is not like, look, if I want to be a truck driver, a truck doesn't have, it's not wheelchair accessible because you have to have a valid medical card. It's not to the same rules and specifications. We're obligated based off the DOT, not based off necessarily some other laws or regulations. In the trucking industry, I'd have that conversation with the recruiter about what your job's going to look like. So if you have any objections like that, doesn't mean that job doesn't exist. There are carriers that, as an example, there's a carrier out of Chattanooga. They don't have openings at this moment. That they're based on Seventh-day Adventists, and so their trucks stop when the sun goes down on Friday night and get started when the sun on Sunday night, or some variation of that. I'm not an expert on it. So those jobs do exist, but have that conversation with your recruiter so that they know, hey, I can place you here. I can't, but maybe give some advice. Again, it's a first conversation, not at orientation or 2 weeks into the job, or God forbid, you're at the customer having that conversation.
Absolutely. It's literally on the very first conversation. And we've had drivers that actually notated on the application somewhere. So that's great as well. So what we're going to do is close up for the day. Again, if you are looking for a job, definitely get a trucking job. Give us a call at 281-968-3100, 281-968-3100, or go to the website at rigonwheels.com and fill out an Intella app completely, and one of the recruiters would definitely give you a call back. We do work 7 days a week. I had a driver that said something through Google because the phones were going straight to voicemail. The recruiters are on the phone all the time, so they're not twiddling their thumbs or anything like that. So definitely leave a voicemail and we will get back with you. Okay, the voicemails are very important for us. Leave a voicemail or a text. Either way, that will work. And Pierson, any lasting, lovely conversation, remarks?
Yeah, the weather seems to be fraying up. Thank God. I know a lot of drivers had a hell of a week last week, depending where in the country that you were. At all times, remain safe. Be safe out there. Take care of yourself. Make smart decisions. If the wind's too strong, the weather's horrible, don't drive. Communicate with your dispatcher so they can communicate with the customer. And above all else, be safe.
Yes, thank you guys. Yeah, definitely be safe. And we'll see you on Tuesday again, same time, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.